Hey, this is PraetorCrash00 and Drewsif82. Today we're going to be talking about property rights or the lack thereof. Drewsif, you can start.
Yeah. Anyways, last night I was talking to a friend of mine who's from Kenya. He was born there and spent 3 years, and then he moved to the States. And good friend of mine, knew him in Atlanta, where I'm originally from. And so we got into this discussion about what are property rights and what where do they begin, where do they end, and what does that necessarily entail. And so a couple of things we were talking about were, he had brought up the Ron Paul thing, and possibly he thinks that Ron Paul is a racist or has some racist tendencies because of, I guess, one of Ron Paul's stances on business owners and property rights, and he was alluding to segregation
Okay.
back then when you had white only restaurants and stuff like that.
I see.
And so I said, okay, well, I understood where he was coming from on that. And I said, well, I think that in this day and age to say that means that Ron Paul's a racist because he was talking about private property rights, and then to kind of go back and do the what if game in the past and say, well, in this situation, then his stance on this would correlate to segregation, therefore he's a racist. I think it's absurd because clearly we live in a totally different age right now, and he's not advocating that whatsoever. I think the deeper issue that what he was getting at was essentially just do you have, when you own something, do you truly own it? And as such, should you be able to enforce whatever you want to enforce in there, or just truly own something? And so we started talking about this, and I said, well, what's the difference right now with like the no shirts, no shoes policy that you see in a lot of different places?
Don't go into that. What do you mean with that?
Well, you see a lot of stores that if you don't have shoes, you can't go in. If you don't have shirts, you can't go in. People say, well, that's ridiculous. Those are apples and oranges. You can't even compare them. That's ridiculous.
Why not?
And I said, well, I was telling my buddy, and I was saying, well, clearly that's discriminatory. You're discriminating against people that are poor. Some people don't have shoes, and that's a form of discrimination that happens every day. No one really talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so, but really, I think that the whole, trying to, apply, the property, Ron Paul's like property rights views to trying to correlate them with the segregation that was taking place in the U.S. I think that you can, like I said, you could try to what if everything, but I think in this day and age it's absurd.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone actually tried that in this day and age, then they would be totally shunned.
They wouldn't have a business.
They wouldn't have
That's
a business, and I think we're in a place in American culture now, in American society, where we would shun that, and these guys would be run out of town,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's absurd, and I think really what at least my understanding of what Ron Paul's approach on property rights is that it is simply, do you own something? If you do, then you should have all rights to manage and run your run your business or own your land and do whatever you want to do on your own property. And so we got into deeper discussions about should you be able to do this on your property? Should you be able to do that? And it was a pretty interesting conversation. And it ended up going to his own family experience, which is interesting. He has a different background than I. I'm a white guy. He's a black African American male from Kenya. And what he started to describe property rights in Kenya, and it was really
Why don't we go and describe what he talked about Kenya in the next segment?
okay.